welcome to Podcast Therapy. And hi, I'm Dr. Lori.
And I'm Emerald Hill.
And we are both counselor as well as comedian.
Yeah.
Now, I am not a comedian, but I love to bring humor into my therapy.
Mm-hmm.
I think laughter brings a lot of health benefits with it.
Yeah.
And so what we decided to do was we decided to actually really coin the term podcast therapy.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are so many therapies out there.
There are.
I mean, you can start to list them and they just go on and on and on. And they're called alternative therapies because there's like a baseline to do with therapy. And then there's all these new wave, I guess you could call them, therapies that have popped up over the last 40 years or so, right? I mean, when I did my BA, I actually majored in art. And from there, I grew into a number of different things, ministry, social work, and ended up with psychotherapy. While Emerald, on the other hand, you started with comedy.
Yeah, I started with comedy. It's like, yeah.
Yeah, it was getting there.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so, and here's your shirt, right? You have the Comedy House.
I do.
And so this podcast is different because there's a number of different components to it. First off, it's to do with comedy meets Comedy House meets the counseling house.
Right.
Right. And so we're bringing both components, talking about therapy, what is therapeutic, how is it that podcast therapy is actually really therapeutic, and as well, on top of that, we are mother-daughter.
Yeah.
Guess which one is the mother? I see you put your hand up there, Emerald.
Yeah.
Maybe at times. But anyway, so so we have, of course, a different way of looking at things, right? Two completely different generations, as well as the fact that our experiences come from somewhere. Right? And a lot of the times, it does come from your family of origin.
Right.
And so this is a great opportunity to explore those experiences and how it is that they have unfolded. Perhaps something to do with me, maybe?
Maybe.
I don't know. As well, I think on top of that, we have the opportunity to explore those stories. And what makes it therapeutic in nature is that as it is that we're exploring our stories, just like in therapy, when a client comes in to explore their stories, we have an experience called transference. I don't know if you've heard of that, where it is that those stories trigger things that the therapist has actually experienced from their own past, right? And so therapy itself, the counselor, the therapist, is exploring their own stories internally, not actually really engaging with their story with the client, because the truth is the therapeutic experience is to do with the client, right? So we just don't get the chance to talk about those stories.
Right.
And our experiences and where it is that we've come from, right? Our own therapeutic journeys, so to speak, as well as, figuring out, all the difficulties of life that we've come across in the past, how it is that they're played out currently, right? And to do with looking ahead into the future.
Yeah.
So this is a great opportunity, I think, for us to do that. And so I coined the term podcast therapy because my experience has been, I don't know if your experience has been the same, a lot of people are looking to podcasts to learn,
Yeah.
to explore themselves, to figure out ways to do things differently,
Yep.
to understand what it is that's happening in their life,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so a lot of the times people come in and they say, well, I listen to this podcast or I listen to that podcast. And what really triggered in my mind was what, people are actually really doing is very much like, back in the day, I say, like maybe 20 or more years ago, the self-help book.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so it was all about the self-help book. Before that, not so much, but people started writing about, well, how you can actually really help yourself. People were engaging with, these self-help books in order to be able to learn, in essence, how to do their own therapy.
Yeah.
And that went along with the DIYs, right? Do it yourself. So a lot of people started actually really doing their own, whatever it is that might be. Used to be hiring somebody to come in and decorate,
Right.
or paint, or reupholster.
Mm-hmm.
But with the DIY, it was always save money, do it yourself, learn how to do it, right? And then perhaps it could even turn into a business or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So with self-help books, they've kind of changed now into podcasts, people listening to podcasts.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that what's so interesting about that too is like, as opposed to reading an audiobook, it very much like listening to a conversation if there's two people. And I know what I like about listening to podcasts is it's almost like that person is talking to me. Like it's just like a one-sided conversation. I put it on while I'm driving or I'm cleaning or doing something, and I don't feel alone. Yeah.
That's a really good point,
Mm-hmm.
right? You have a therapist right in your car.
Yeah, always.
Because you are one. Anyway, so, and then on top of that is to do with the humor, right? And so what's interesting about humor is humor lightens the mood,
Yeah.
right? It gets your endorphins flowing and it makes you actually feel good, right? And so not everything has to be dire and serious.
Right.
And it is good to be able to lighten things. The truth is, when we think about, our own self-care, being in the moment, that sort of thing, we all have commonalities.
Right.
Because we're all human. We all have experiences. And a lot of the times, those experiences are very, very similar.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we explore these experiences, it allows us to, again, just like what you said, not feel alone.
Yeah.
Oh, other people have had these experiences too, right? They've had to learn how it is to get from here to there as well,
Yeah.
right? So it really is a connector between us, and that's why there's transference.
Yeah.
Right? Because we have had experiences that trigger us into thinking, oh yeah, I remember when.
Mm-hmm.
The difficulty when you're actually really talking to friends as opposed to a therapist is that friends get triggered too, right?
Yes.
They remember as well. It's transference. They actually then want to explore their own story, and unfortunately it can turn into a bit of a power struggle back and forth when one person tells their story and the other one's like, oh yeah, that happened to me, and then they start telling their own story.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's really the difference, because we're not telling our own stories. Our own stories remain inside of us.
Right.
And so in that, just like the listener doesn't actually really get to know who it is that we are.
Right.
They don't get to learn what it is that we've learned through our own exploration and healing journey.
Right.
So podcast therapy is the opportunity for that transference, for the listener, for the viewer, to have their own triggered experience, to be able to say, oh yeah, right, that actually speaks to me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in the speaking, I think, that connection that allows for the therapeutic process to be unveiled.
Right.
So that you get the opportunity to listen, to learn, to figure things out, to actually engage and understand how others, us, have really struggled at times.
Right.
To work through our own issues, to get to a place where it is that we have the insight, the wisdom to be able to, in essence, sit at the table.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So if anybody has that experience where it is that you're saying to yourself, oh yeah, that really reminds me of something, or oh yeah, I had that experience too, or how did you do this or that? You didn't talk about that. Then definitely please reach out and connect with us so that we can actually really explore those nuances or differences, or invite others in to have conversations about different areas of interest that you would love to be able to hear about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, hopefully what's going to happen is along the journey, there's going to be some laughter. There's going to be some fun.
Yeah.
There's going to be some joy, right? As it is that we do our explorations, because that's definitely a part of what it is that we're doing, right? We're lightening the mood on things to create those connections so that we can laugh at ourselves.
Yeah.
And not be so dire and serious about the things that have happened or perhaps are happening now, right? So that you can be, in essence, resilient, right? Be able to bounce back from whatever those difficulties might be.
Right, yeah.
So what have we named some of those alternative therapies that have come along the way?
Yeah.
Definitely art therapy. That is the basis of where it is that I began. And so art has therapeutic components that, as it is that you draw, create, you're exploring your emotions, your story, your history, right? And you have the opportunity to get it out of you, to see it differently, to create changes in the way in which it is that you're looking at it or figuring those things out and how you feel about it.
Right.
Aromatherapy.
Yeah.
That's another one. And you're big into aromatherapy, right?
Yeah, so I make artisanal soap, and so I have classes that people can come and make their own soap and pick their own scents and things like that to incorporate into them. And so we do cleansing therapy, which incorporates obviously aromatherapy, picking the scent that you like, but also being able to kind of become more attuned and familiar with your body. I've lost over 100 pounds, and so for a long time I didn't want to look at myself. And so being able to kind of make my own soap and connect with it in that way sort of opened a door to making me feel more comfortable, sort of exploring my own body and being able to look at myself and interact with myself and sort of see myself in a more positive view. And so like connecting those different senses, sight and smell, and feel has really been helpful in being able to do that. So yeah, I would say just aromatherapy.
And you said making the soap you found extremely therapeutic.
I did, because when I was at my heaviest, and all throughout my childhood, I loved baking. And I don't know if it was because of just the interactiveness with it, but also being able to make something and have something at the end of that process, be able to show people and share with people. And so soap making is very much like baking. You measure out your ingredients and you put it all together, and then you get something at the end. And I think that I'm able to share it with other people as well is something that is such a big thing for me.
Yeah. Well, and of course, because you are a comedian as well, there's actually comedy therapy, which goes under the heading of expressive arts therapy.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's something that I do as well. I try to go to different places and do comedy fundraisers with them and for them. And so also being able to kind of interact with the people that are there. Like I work with Indwell, and so I do a comedy fundraiser there. And I try to work with the people there to make their own comedy sets about something that's important to them, or kind of talking about their living and their lifestyle at the time, and sort of being able to connect with other people in that way. So yeah.
And of course, under that heading of expressive arts therapy, there are a number of different therapies, which might be dance therapy, play therapy,
Yeah.
sand therapy,
Yeah.
just to name a few.
Yeah.
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 What other therapies can you think of? I mean, there's bigger ones, right? Your physiotherapy has not actually to do with mental health, but to do with your body
Right.
and body movement,
Yeah.
right?
Yoga is pretty big. It ties in with meditation, which is also with mindfulness. That's incorporated in therapy quite a bit.
That's true. And viewed as an alternative therapy,
Right.
right? There's also video game therapy now,
Right.
which is to do with interacting with a video game, learning how to manage your emotions and that sort of thing as it is that you're playing the video games. It creates a great connector
Yeah.
between therapist and client as well. And that there's also VR therapy.
Yeah, virtual reality therapy. Yeah, so you get to put on your VR headset, and those gloves are kind of hand sensors, and so you go into an alternate reality. Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. And so it's a great way to work through issues such as phobias, anxieties, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and ecotherapy, you get to actually go outside and interact with your environments and things like that, become more connected with nature.
Yeah. That's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think that any crafting is actually really viewed as a therapy as well.
Yeah, crochet and knitting and making any kind of carpet or anything like that.
Yeah. And so, like, basically what we're saying is anything can be therapeutic.
Yeah, I think that anything can be therapeutic as long as it's done with intention. Yeah.
That's a good point. Yes. It creates a sense of focus,
Yeah.
takes you away from where it is that you currently are, allows you to work through emotions or to provide a sense of calm and safety.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting about therapy is like you're developing those skills, like coping skills, empathy is a skill. And what's interesting about comedy and therapy is I think that sometimes people are hesitant because you want comedy to be intentionally funny. And it's really hard to develop the skill to make it that way. But when you kind of get there and you have that joke that has a piece of you in it, it's even more meaningful, right? Because it's something that you created and maybe it's funny.
And hopefully it's funny.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah.
There's an expectation there. Yeah. Where, and that's a good point, right? Because in counseling, it's not necessarily an expectation. Sometimes people actually view what is funny as being laughed at.
Absolutely, yeah.
That it's made to be silly.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. Like watching the Trump and Biden debate.
Yeah.
So that's the look. Yeah, so you have to be able to work with comedy in a kind of specific way, right? You have to be able to connect through the laughter.
Yeah.
Right? In order to be able to have that therapeutic component. Because if it doesn't connect, right, misses the mark.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And can actually, make people feel bad about themselves.
Yeah, for sure. Nobody wants to feel bullied or make fun of in therapy.
Oh, well, or anywhere really,
Yeah.
right? And being the butt of a joke, as they say,
Yeah.
right? Which, can be a part of comedy with the roast.
Yeah, absolutely. Or crowd work, right? A lot of people are afraid to sit in the front because they don't want to be pointed out and made fun of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, so there's all these different components to all of these different therapies that are out there. And I think that, part of what it is that we're doing also too is to do some exploration of all of those different therapies and how it is that, we've come across them along the way, how we found them helpful with whatever it is that, we've been trying to work through,
Mm-hmm.
right? And hopefully it will actually really connect with you, the listener, the viewer, to be able to then perhaps spur you on to give it a try too.
Right.
Where do we go from here?
Yeah.
Where do we go from here? Oh my goodness. It's so funny, right? Because when you're putting all of this together, the podcast therapy, I mean, the truth is there's a process to it.
Yeah.
And you don't realize how much work there is that goes into everything that people do.
Yeah.
Am I keeping you up?
Hurry, say something fun.
Thanks.
Ah,
Yes, I want my own shirt.
no.
Yeah. So, and Emerald, you are actually really very techy. I'm not the one that does any of the techie stuff.
Well, just because you don't do it and I'm forced to do it doesn't mean I'm the tech person. I've had to learn so much just behind like Garage Band and iMovie, and then finding out that those are like the least forms of editing equipment.
Oh,
I know. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Well, and so, and I work with workbooks. So I am, so in a way, kind of techie, but I don't like format them. Anyway, so write them, not format them. And so for me, it's all in the experience of holding on to things. That's the self-help book, right? It's
Yeah.
like, bending over the pages and underlining the different things that are most important and trying to memorize them and implement them and use them, right? And we will actually be going through some of those workbooks and how it is that they might apply to you and how they might be helpful as well. So just a very different experience, the hands-on kind of modernism approach,
Yeah.
as opposed to the technology postmodern
Yeah.
kind of approach,
Mhm.
right? Speaking of which, modernism was really about finding yourself.
Ah.
And so finding yourself was kind of like the experience of when you graduate high school, graduate college, you go on a world tour,
Right.
right? To see the world. In the finding yourself is kind of like, where do I fit,
Yeah.
right? And that was really based in modernism. Well, you have to go and find yourself. Where is it that you fit? What is it that works for you? Because everybody's very different.
Mm-hmm.
The postmodern approach is actually creating yourself.
Ah.
It's more the Madonna, right?
Ah.
The artist, not the one from long ago. Anyway, right? And so recreating yourself to match your context, to match wherever it is that you happen to be at, right? And so that was not like you were lost in some way.
Right.
You haven't been found. It's that you just haven't been created,
Right.
right? So you are, in essence, putting yourself together, your look, your temperament, your way of being, right? And so that's more the postmodernist approach.
Right.
Personally, I think they work very, very well together,
Right.
right? Finding the place that you fit, as well as creating who it is that you're actually really wanting to be.
Mm-hmm.
Both working very much together. Yeah. So we have the opportunity to find ourselves by doing some exploration and figuring out where is it that we do fit? What therapy actually really fits for us, right? As it is that we explain and explore our own experiences, our stories. How did we find where we fit? As well, we have the opportunity to, in essence, create ourselves just like we're doing right now.
Yeah.
Right? We're creating the podcast therapy.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you wanted to say?
I think just like one more thing about the transference and just like the interaction with it. It's interesting when like you're a comedian and you're kind of listening to another comic on stage, and it's almost like they get to be in that client role where it's all about them and they're saying their piece, and you can't interact because you have to sit there and be a good audience member and listen. But at the same time, as they're talking about their set, you're thinking about all of the add-ons to their jokes, or how you would do that story differently, or like something in the back of your head that like brings it up. And it's almost to the point sometimes where you're like, if I tell that story, are they gonna think that I'm either stealing their joke or like just like too inspired by what they're saying? So it's kind of fun making that decision for yourself. Like, is this joke a part of me, or is it something that I'm willing to workshop with that person to give to them? And so people will give each other their jokes and things like that. So it's almost like podcast therapy, in which, you know, we're kind of giving you our spiel and our take on it, but we're more than happy, you know, for you to kind of give that feedback yourself if anything comes up for you.
Very good. Yeah. So we're back to the question, where do we go from here? So my next thought is, now that we've explained what podcast therapy is and where it is that really it's come from those self-help books, which, by the way, I do want to say something with self-help books. You know, self-help books are what I call a broad brushstroke to appeal to a very, very wide audience.
Right.
So the hard thing with self-help books is, because it is appealing to a very wide audience, it's very hard to really make it work for the individual.
Right.
And that's the thing about therapy, right? With therapy, we're really working with the individual. It's specific.
Right.
Because everybody comes from somewhere or is about something. No two people have had the same experiences, even if they grew up together.
Yeah.
Different value system, different understandings, right? We're in different classes, learn different things. And so that is really the value of one-on-one therapy. It really is a connection for those specifics for the individual. Whereas with the self-help book, it's really that really big application. One or two things are going to perhaps maybe fit and maybe are applicable and perhaps not.
Yeah.
And so that's why, for me anyway, it's very hard to recommend a self-help book.
Yeah. I
find, because, you know, the specifics of what a person is looking for, it's very hard to say, oh, well, that's that specific book.
Right.
Right? And if you really are interested in self-help books, all you have to do is open Amazon, just type in self-help book, and thousands of books will come up, right? And so, but hopefully with our podcast therapy, what we're going to be able to do is connect with you on those individual basis when it is that you connect with us.
Right.
So that gives you the opportunity to say, hey, specifically, I'm looking at this. Tell me more about this.
Right.
Yeah, and hopefully we will be able to do that. And if not, we will find somebody and have them come in to talk about that.
Yeah.
And most probably the one thing you did notice is that we're both women.
Hi.
And, you know, as talking about specifics, it does make the podcast kind of gender specific.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, so,
Can't speak for the men.
well, and I mean, so, you know, in essence, we are going to be talking about our experiences. And so, in reality, when you think about that, it is a feminine experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we'll try not to mention our periods, but yeah.
Too late. Oh dear. Yeah. I've been trying to think about, you know, like something that I've experienced back in the day. You'll hear me say that a lot. That has similarities to a podcast. When I was growing up, of course, it was all about the tape. So, you know, you have a tape recorder, you put the tape in, and you could listen to someone, you know, giving a speech or whatever it is that might be. Nothing interactive, like nothing specific to anything. I mean, it would be a speech made to an auditorium of people, you know, some sort of mentorship or that sort of thing. Past that, though, when I think about it, I mean, really, like all we had was the radio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's funny about that is people hate radio hosts. So
I know I do. And I know this is going to sound really, really, really bad, but I'm not a talk radio person. So, you know, growing up, I listened to the music. It was always about the records, right?
Yeah.
So having a record player playing records, and listening to music on the radio. And you could get cassettes of music, right? The old 8-track tape. I don't know if anybody has actually really experienced it. They would play music and they would go kerchunk and then go on to the next section of music. But really, like, no talking. There wasn't anybody teaching or anything like that. No online stuff, no computers, you know, no real, like, technology at all.
Yeah.
And so that's my experience growing up with something, I guess, kind of similar to the podcast. Yeah, so nowhere near what it is that we're actually really doing here.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think that for me growing up, the world just kind of started to get more and more connected in its different ways, right? Like the cell phone started to become popular when I was like in 7th or 6th grade or something like that. I had my first one that was a hand-me-down from my dad when I was in 8th grade. But I know that when I was a kid, there was something called like Club Penguin and like Oogle or whatever, where you could go on and connect with other people and stuff like that. And so that was kind of like the beginnings of Facebook, and then eventually it turned to like Instagram and Vine and stuff like that. So it was really starting to kind of snowball into everyone being connected all the time.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Landline. So, grow up, you know, talking on the phone. That's what it is that we did. That was, you know, hours and hours on the phone, leaning against the wall, right? No, you say goodbye. No, you say goodbye. No, you say goodbye. I mean, that was my experience of it. Yeah, so, you know, and then again, self-help books, they really didn't gain momentum, I don't think, until like the 90s, the 2000s. You know, like I think that it started around then, maybe a bit in the 80s as far as I can remember, but nothing really more than that.
Right. Yeah. And it's kind of funny, I don't know why, but when you were saying that, it reminded me that when TV started to become popular, they said that it was going to be the end of war because everyone was just going to be able to see each other's experiences and empathize with them. And that didn't happen.
Sad but true, right?
Yeah.
So interesting. Yeah. So I do remember, though, I triggered my own memory actually. There I have, and I'll have to find it. I think it's like 1962, something like that. McCall's self-help book for how to become a lady.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember that book?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. So, I say that, but still, right? Like it did gain momentum, but not become big
Yeah.
until many years later. But for podcasts, I must admit that, I never really thought that it would become something.
No, it's interesting. Like when I think about podcasts, like I don't know why, but I always just immediately thought of like audiobooks and stuff like that. And then what was worse is that I think that a lot of the ones that I stumbled across, it was like episodes in where everyone kind of established who they are already and probably their audience connects with them a lot more. So it was a turn off for me because for the first like 10 minutes it would just be kind of like quipping back and forth about their day, and it was kind of like listening to radio hosts, which I already said people hate. So I don't know why, like for me it was just like I don't know how people get into this until I think I found one or two where it was like, okay, I'm starting at the very beginning and going with this person, and then it kind of became more of a realization like, oh, I think it's more because of the journey with that person.
Oh, that's interesting. Somebody recommended to me a podcast and I was trying to listen to it in the car. What I find for myself is I like to get to the point. Like if I want to learn about X, I want the person to be talking about X. And because I want to get from here to there, get it, and then be able to use it. What I found was this meandering road.
Well, yeah.
Of all kinds of stories and anecdotes and this and that. And I found myself like, and I fast forward, that would be the cassette thing, just get to the next, is it on the next one? Okay, is it on the next one? Oh, is it on the next? What are you laughing about? No, seriously.
What are you doing? It's funny to me.
It's true, right? And of course, it's hard to really, I found, very frustrating to connect with.
Yeah. Well, honestly, like, I actually really find that too when it's about something that I need to learn. It reminds me when I was back in like 7th grade in math class, and of course I was terrible at math and everyone let me know it. And then when I'm trying to pay attention and my teacher is like, oh, and how you solve this equation. Oh, did anybody see the baseball game this weekend? Let's talk about the baseball game. Oh, and I guess I already covered that. And then it's like, this isn't helping.
True. Well, yeah, so my hope is that with podcast therapy, we really keep on topic.
Yeah.
Right? And so that we have our specific topics that we're talking about each and every time, and that we're, as much as it is that we want to be telling our own stories, that it actually really creates that connections for you that, actually really connected to us, and how it is that through therapeutic means, through, lightening the mood, through finding the humor, the humanity, so to speak, right? That self-compassion, we're all very, very connected that way. So that we'll be able to actually really stay on task for you. So that's one thing that this podcast will be able to do. Look back and, into the ways in which things were set up.
Yeah.
As well as, the things that played out.
Yeah.
And how it is that we've got here today.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know. I think all alternative therapies actually really, you know, have slowly grown over that period of time. They may have started like in the 40s and that sort of thing, like with art therapy, etc. But the truth is, didn't gain momentum until really, I would say, significantly, like around the 2000s. Right? And so then, the therapies became more mainstream. And when I say mainstream, I'm talking about like CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yeah.
Like that is like a baseline that every single therapist learns, and every single doctor sends their patient out. You need cognitive behavioral therapy. There's many, many, many different therapies since then that we'll also be able to explore for sure, right? And have slowly grown over this period of time. But these different therapies that we're talking about, including podcast therapy, is still viewed as alternative. Art therapy, even though it's been around since the 40s, still viewed as alternative therapy.
For sure.
Not a mainstream therapy, right? So something that you can use as an adjunct to add to your baseline therapies, but definitely, not something that on its own is actually really viewed as a mainstream therapy.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, like, even still today, therapy has a stigma behind it. There's something wrong with you that you have to go to therapy, right? And I think that that's why, so many places and so many sayings really incorporate mental health, because it's more relatable for people to kind of associate with, well, I have to take care of my health, right? As opposed to there's something wrong with me, I have to go to therapy. And it's interesting when you look at all those alternative therapies and really see like a lot of the things that people do individually are, something that is therapy for themselves, right? Like fishing could be considered a therapy, right? You go with your friends or you go by yourself, and there's this quiet time that at the end, maybe you're successful, you catch a fish, and maybe at the end you're not, but it's still time you got away for yourself, right? And so it's kind of interesting looking at all of those different individual things and being able to sort of see that person and what they enjoy, and being able to really play up, well, how does that contribute to your health, right? And what do you get from those benefits and stuff like that? And so when I think about comedy, and all of those things, I never really understood until I looked into it how it influences like the mind, right? You have to think about it, and it triggers that positivity, that positive feeling, but it also is almost like a way to connect with your body, right? Because just out of nowhere you start to laugh, and that's like something that your body has to kind of do organically and genuinely, naturally, right? And so it's kind of funny when you're sort of trying to connect with your body and your mind in that way. Well, what do I find as comedy? What's my comedy? What do I find as funny? What can I get a physical reaction from myself with?
Yeah, I wasn't thinking in those terms either, right? Because when I was saying about self-help or do-it-yourself, the truth is, like, a lot of shows started coming on TV, which was, do yoga at home alone, right? You don't have to go to a yoga studio in order to do yoga. And so it's, with the podcast therapy, you can do that anywhere, right? In your car, at home, with your headset or whatever. Nobody has to even know what it is that you're doing. Whereas when you go to therapy, yes, I mean, the truth is that someone might see you, right? You have to sit in a waiting room, that sort of thing. And so there's no anonymity to going to therapy. And so a lot of people confuse actually really confidentiality with anonymity. Anonymity is that no one is going to see you. Confidentiality is that no one's going to ever know what it is that you talked about. Right? So along with the self-help, along with the do-it-yourself, the truth is that there were a lot of components coming out where your exercise program was at home, in the basement. You didn't have to go to the gym, right? And so that you can learn different things, and of course learn how to be a therapist at home. You don't actually really have to even go to school. You don't have to enter a school in order to do so, right? Or many different things just like that. So that was another area, I think, that has really grown. And so when we're talking about the alternative therapies, whether it's soap making or whether it's, what's another therapy? Whether it's the VR therapy or whether it's whatever, right? Like, you can do that separate, right? And even with workbooks, right? You can take them home. You can do them at your leisure.
Yeah.
You don't have to actually be in therapy.
Yeah.
So that's a very personalized way of doing things.
And I think too, what is the draw to being able to do things anonymously and at home is that you get to make mistakes anonymously and at home. And I think that that's a really big thing. Like in any kind of learning environment, there's I don't know if it's so much of a fear, but for me it's definitely an annoyance, right? When I'm learning and I know that I'm going to make a mistake and I can see that I've made a mistake, and instead of just being able to like redo it or know for myself, there's that other person there that points it out, and then like, even though it's not necessary, sometimes, right, like you just feel like those things are unnecessary. Well, I don't want to have to go to the gym and have somebody come over to me and try to correct what I'm doing, right? You just want to be able to hash it out and figure it out by yourself. And I think that's what's so great about the learning process too, about whether it's therapy or whatever kind of skill, is that through, podcasts, you can go back and rethink about it or re-listen to it. So that you can say to yourself, like, does this apply to me? Do I have to hash it out with myself as opposed to talking to somebody else about it?
Exactly. So I think that that's a really important component to it, right? I mean, I think one day there's going to be AI therapy, if there isn't already, where it is that, you just have an AI going, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How does that make you feel? Wouldn't know what that's like.
That's so funny. Back in the day of the robot, eh?
Yeah.
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 But those are all really great thoughts. Yeah. All the different components and how it is that they pull together to where it is that we are now. So just interesting to think, right, that the people that are listening to us could be anywhere, doing anything, thinking anything, reflecting anything, right? Being triggered by anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's something else that I find happens to me when I'm listening to a podcast. And I don't know if it's helpful or if it's not, but I whisk myself away, spirit myself away into my own response or my own answer. And then like 20 minutes later, I'll tune back into the podcast after I've had my own adventure in my head. Yeah.
So true, right?
Yeah.
Well, and that's the value of that transference, right? Yeah. So, I mean, there's positive aspects to it. There are negative aspects to it, where it is that, you're not listening.
Yeah.
Right? But the positive aspect to it is that it's triggered you into somewhere that's making you reflect upon something. So, and then the great thing about podcast therapy is that you can, in essence, rewind, right? You can reconnect with whatever it is that has taken you away, but also to reach out to be able to say, this is what happened to me when it was that you were talking about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that would be good stuff for us to know. Yeah.
Yeah.
What would be a topic that you would like to talk about next?
Maybe like interpersonal stuff.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Like anything specific come up, or like interpersonal violence, or just interpersonal stuff?
I guess just like maybe we could do just maybe several topics about it, like interpersonal violence, maybe like what that looks like with an acquaintance, a friend, someone close to you, like a partner. There's like fluctuating stuff with it.
You want to get into the hardcore right away. That sounds fine.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. That sounds good. We're going to go right into interpersonal dynamics, right? And how it is that unfortunately things can go awry into interpersonal violence. And it happens a lot, like a lot. And the one thing that I find too is that a lot of people do not recognize it.
Yeah.
They think something's wrong. It feels like something's wrong. They can't put their fingers on it, right? Because it's kind of insidious, and it takes a long time to kind of like come to terms with it. And so I think that's a fantastic topic for us to be able to explore, because I know you've come across a lot of interpersonal violence, have a lot of experience with it. Yeah. And I created a workbook on interpersonal violence that we can definitely delve into next time. If anybody has any stories, have come across any kind of difficulty with relationship, because that's what we're really talking about, right? And I mean, interpersonal violence is between people, right? And but there's also, of course, self-violence as well, right? Self-harm. But we'll concentrate on interpersonal violence next time. Yeah, we'll see if we can lighten the mood on that. Oh dear. Yeah, well, thank you, Emerald. It's been a joy.
Thank you, Lori.
Yeah.
It's been a joy.
Yeah. And thank you for joining us. And this is our first, what do you call it? Session? First
episode.
First episode. So please, well, as it is that you finish watching this, please, reach out, let us know what your thoughts are. What would you like to learn about? What would you like to hear about? Right? And so hopefully we will be able to explore that for you, and as well give you some great insights.
Criticize us.
Not so much.
Yeah. Well, bye for now. Okay, I have a joke for you.
Oh, okay.
Okay. What's the difference between jam and marmalade?
Jam and marmalade. What's the difference between jam and marmalade? Well, jam you put on toast, and marmalade you put on toast. Okay. What is the difference between jam and marmalade?
You can't marmalade a dick up your ass.
What does that mean? Oh, jam. Oh dear. The things a mother does not want to know about her daughter.
Oh, that's an old joke.
Oh! Elder abuse.
Slander.
The places you've been.